Hello and welcome. I am Scrabberlock and this is City of Heroes. We are now with level 38 Dominator, Mister Eclipse, and we are on a story arc now for Colleen Nelson. This is the Path of the Dark. We don't have any clues yet, but obviously you guys aren't going to see the whole story arc, I don't think, because we'll probably not level up before we finish it. But you'll see the beginning of the arc. And I would have brought you back at a later point, but it's been quite a while since I've shot any videos, mostly because it took me a while to get from level 37 to 38. So let's go ahead and get this character started and get this episode for level 38 started. And today we're going to talk about mistakes that game masters make. This is a response to or a discussion about stuff that's talked about in a Luke Hart video of the same title, something like DM mistakes. What is it called? Hang on, let me check it. It is called DM layer. It is called "Don't Nuke Your Game" in the thumbnail. DM mistakes that no one talks about. I don't know. I don't think he's at all correct that nobody talks about them because I know we've talked about them here and I've talked about them in response to other YouTubers talking about them. So I'm not sure about that. But in any case, that's what we're going to discuss. But before we do that, let's check our enhancements and our powers. We got Heart of Darkness, which is another, I believe, although it doesn't say it's PBAOE, I believe it is another point blank AOE. Where is it? Right here. Right, so this is point blank. It's not required, it doesn't require any targeting. So I don't know how much we're going to use that because I don't tend to use the point blank AOE powers much at all. I usually rely on these ones up here, and I'm trying to keep them at arm's length. So this character's doing pretty well. He's got this great hold that works very well, and the council are susceptible to... Oh, didn't work. Oh, this is a boss. Ouch. Okay, I didn't realize that. The council are susceptible to the possess power, so unlike the... Who was it? The Nemesis who resisted it. We can go ahead and use that power no problem. And I accidentally used it on him. I meant to click the hold power. So, yeah, this character is going pretty well. We've got 12 episodes or so left to go of this character. I don't know how quickly I'm going to be able to get them posted just because I'm super, super busy. I don't know if this had happened yet the last time I shot a video, just to let you guys understand, but my normal time to make videos is in the evening, and one of the adjunct professors in my department got very sick over the holidays. I didn't know about this because I don't have any reason to know about it normally, but she teaches the intro bio class. It's the same class that I teach, and she teaches the 6 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. online section. So I'm now teaching an evening online section, which absolutely butchers my Tuesday and Thursday evenings every week. Right? So basically I can't, unless I want to eat dinner at super early, which I often don't have time to do because I also teach a 2 to 3:30 class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then I have to kind of come home and get set up for the online stuff. And then I teach from 6 to 7:15, and then if I'm lucky, I'm by around 7:30, I'm eating dinner, and I'm done by 8 something. And now I'm basically really tired, and unless I'm going to start immediately at 8 o'clock doing some City of Heroes, it's just not going to happen. In fact, it's actually almost 10 o'clock now on a Friday night, but I decided, what the heck, I'm going to play some COH. I feel like chatting a little bit with you guys. I've had quite the stressful week, so we'll get a little bit of stress out by playing COH. But yeah, it's just been very busy, and that's the main excuse. It also takes longer and longer to level up at these levels, so you're going to be seeing more infrequent posting of the City of Heroes content as we get toward level 50. There's just kind of no real way around that. One option I do have, let's dominate this guy. One option I do have that I've been thinking about is possibly getting an XP booster so that I level up a little faster. I don't feel like I have any reason to quote-unquote savor this character. I've done all these story arcs before, and I've played this character enough with each level that I don't feel the need to keep it slow. So I normally don't do XP boost, but I guess I could look into doing that to sort of speed it up so that I can post the content a little bit more frequently for you guys, assuming you want that. But I also had got distracted by playing some other games. The folks who made Big Ant Studios, the folks who made AO Tennis 2 and 1, made a new game called Tiebreak. It is the official video game of both the ATP, the Association of Tennis Professionals, which is the Men's Tennis Association, and the WTA, the Women's Tennis Association, which is actually named the Women's Tennis Association, unlike the men's one. And so they're officially supporting it, which means you get all of the like, quote unquote, real, the professional players, and you get most of the real venues, although not all of them. And then so it's similar to AO Tennis 2, but different. And as you may remember, I had created a bunch of video content about that. Now, the majority of people don't seem to have been interested, but I thought, well, maybe people would want to watch some Tiebreak. I might try it, so I did shoot some video of it, and I played it for, I don't know, the equivalent of 4 or 5 episodes before I posted anything. And in the end, I decided I don't really like it as a game. There are some pretty severe problems with it, and so but I did take the time to play and shoot some video of that. I then, based on some comments that people who play a lot of tennis games have made, I then downloaded and started trying, and am currently playing around with a game called Tennis Elbow, which is nowhere near as pretty. Tiebreak has all the beautiful animations and the cutscenes and everything. Tennis Elbow has none of that. It looks like it was made 20 years ago, but it's very realistic in terms of how it implements the tennis. It's more of a simulation than, say, an arcade game. And so it's got less gimmicky stuff than a game like AO2 or Tiebreak or even Topspin. It's not as pretty, but it's more accurate to how tennis is played. I haven't really got the hang of it, but I have shot a few possible episodes. So post in the comments whether you have any interest in seeing that. If nobody's interested, I don't need to post it, and I can stop recording it. I actually am glad I recorded it, whether I post or not. And I probably should do this more for games when I first start to play them, actually, is record myself and rewatch, because I've noticed myself making some mistakes with how I was positioning my character in the game that I would not have noticed. I did not notice while I was playing it, right? I didn't realize that I was standing basically in the wrong spot to hit a proper to hit a proper topspin or what have you. And the only reason I noticed that was because I had video of it, and when I rewatched it to see, did the video come out okay? Is the audio good? Stuff like that. I was like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be standing like in the green zone to hit the ball. They give you like a little help to show you, okay, there's this little swatch on the ground. This is where you need to position yourself to be in a place to hit the ball after it bounces, and it goes red, orange, yellow, green, and you want to position yourself in the band of green. And I was actually positioning myself several steps behind the green, and I was like, oh, I'm not actually standing in the right spot. I need to move forward more. And so that was actually really helpful. So that is, before we get to the D&D stuff, that is actually a piece of advice I can actually give to everybody. If you have the capacity to record yourself playing, you don't have to narrate or anything. But if you have a capacity to record yourself playing a tough game, especially one you're struggling with, it can be well worth it to record yourself and then watch it and see where you're making mistakes, because sometimes you can't actually see it while you're playing because you're so busy clicking on things and looking at the various inputs that you don't realize that you're actually not doing what you were supposed to do when you're timing something incorrectly or positioning yourself incorrectly or whatever. And so that's actually something that hopefully would be useful to multiple people, and so just keep that in mind. If you're ever struggling with the game, you could possibly do that. I have seen myself do things wrong a lot of times, including in this game, right? There are times when I have not been able to find a glowy, and when I watch it back, I'm like, yeah, that glowy was in the corner as I spun the camera, and because I was looking at an enemy, I didn't see that it was in the corner, and I spun it around. But watching it, I see it, I'm like, yeah, I missed that, right? Didn't see it while I was playing, but I see it afterwards. So you can kind of troubleshoot and figure out why you made mistakes if you watch the video back. So um, anyway, that's a little bit of advice that I can give. And so anybody's interested in Tennis Elbow, one of the things I noticed watching a couple of the videos is somebody who posted a comment in the video of the guy who was kind of doing a review of Tennis Elbow said, this was like several months ago that this was posted, more TE4, Tennis Elbow 4 content, please. There's not enough of this on YouTube. So I guess that isn't a lot of it. So I thought, well, that might be a reason for me to possibly produce something like that if people are interested. But you guys can let me know. If you want to see other games and if something like Tennis Elbow is something you'd want to see, let me know. If it's not, let me know that too, and I can certainly not post it. No skin off my nose not to post it. It's more work to make a thumbnail and post the thing than not. All right, so now let's talk about the mistakes that no one tells you about. One of the things that Luke Hart did, so he's talking about a GM that ran a game that he was in at one point, and he gives some examples of things that I'm not going to repeat all of his examples. If you want to watch Luke's video, he does a great job. But as part of the discussion, he describes a case where, the GM had made a whole bunch of lore and backstory that he wanted to give out to the players, and his method of doing it was to have them meet one NPC and then another NPC, and have the two NPCs basically converse with each other. And the players sat there for 15 or 20 minutes as the NPCs discussed the world lore. And they were basically all sitting there watching the GM roleplay with himself. And so he said, yeah, don't do that, right? Lore dumps are bad, but having to sit there and watch as the GM does all the role-playing while you watch. I mean, first of all, as a game master, it's not any fun for me to role-play with myself. That's called solo gaming. And although solo gaming is perfectly fine, I'm doing it right here, you're not going to do that when you're with a group of people. So, yeah, guys, don't make up a scene that is just you role-playing one character, one NPC talking to another. That's a terrible idea. This reminds me of the Bad Rob, and I've described this before, where he played his PCs as NPCs, and then what he did was he would have them fight the bad guy, and the bad guy's immune to us, but his characters can affect it, and his characters would, come in and save the day and do all the cool stuff, and he'd basically be essentially fighting the battle by himself while we watched on helplessly because we were too weak to fight. We didn't have the right weaknesses or whatever of the bad guy. And so you definitely don't want to do that. Your players, I've said this many times. We came here to play D&D or Champions or Savage Worlds or the Indiana Jones role-playing game or Call of Cthulhu, whatever it is. We came here to play, not to watch other people play. So just as much as you don't want to put the spotlight on one player character and have me sit there and watch it for an hour, you definitely don't want to put the spotlight on your own NPCs and have me sit there and watch it for an hour. That is not a good idea. I don't necessarily agree that this is a sort of a mistake no one talks about, because lots of people talk about these kinds of mistakes. But this is about spotlight hogging, right? The GM is essentially... Now, he's spotlight hogging. Now, I don't know whether that GM wanted the spotlight or whether he just thought this would be a more fun way to do a lore dump than, say, just giving the characters a PDF file or a Word file with the information on it. But honestly, you're probably better off with the Word file than with a lore dump, because then the players can read the Word file at their convenience and it doesn't stop them from being able to role play. I mean, the biggest problem isn't even just the spotlight, it's that it takes away from the players the ability to affect things. That is, it takes their agency away. While I'm listening to you do a lore dump, I have no way to affect the world. When the two NPCs are talking to each other, I can't really interject, and it's not a lot of fun to be in a situation where your character can't have any effect on the world, on the situation, right? This is taking your agency away in the very strict sense. So you don't want to do that. And, honestly, there are a lot of written modules that do this, right? They're giving a lore dump in them. I think one of the reasons that DMs sometimes do this sort of thing is they see it in written adventures, published adventures by the company. There is a scene where the players are just along for the ride. The old, and I've talked about this many times, the old, no matter what the players do, this happens because it's the next part of the story, which utterly takes away all agency from the characters. So you don't want to do that. And having the NPCs role play with each other all by yourself as a GM and the players don't really get to do anything is a great example of taking away player agency. Another thing, and this is not going in the order, by the way, that Luke talks about them, it's just the order that I jotted them down. But another thing that he talks about, and we've discussed this before, is the GM in this case got mad at one of the players, the annoying rogue who was stealing from the party and stuff, and he was irritated with this guy. So he put the rogue into a situation like the rogue was off on his own, and he came across a very clear, obvious, inescapable death trap and got killed. And he said this is a very clear case of the game master punishing the player because he didn't like the things, or punishing the character because he didn't like the things the player was doing, right? Now, I don't like your character. I don't like what you're doing with your character, so I'm going to punish the character for the way you're playing it, right? And so he says, no, you shouldn't do that. You should never punish the character for what the player is doing. And I agree. And if you remember, we've talked about this in my own game group. We used to punish the characters because the players came late to the session and stuff. And again, this is problematic because the character isn't doing anything. It's the player doing something. And you shouldn't be using the character as an instrument to punish the player. That's just not the way to run a game. If you have a problem with what the player is doing, you need to talk about it out of character, discuss it, and make sure that you're telling the player what the player issue is rather than punishing the character by killing it off or, having it turned into a villain or any of the other silly things that GMs sometimes do to punish the players. I've told you guys that in the past about the blue lightning, right? This one of my friends, the good Rob actually, and as good of a GM as he was, he did this, and I'm not sure it was a good idea, but when the player was being unruly or doing something, or breaking the rules or any of that stuff, the good Rob would have a bolt of blue lightning come out of the sky and your character would get hit with it and vanish. And you're out of the session. And I mean, that was actually not as bad as, like, say, killing off a character or something, because this was sort of an in-character reason for explaining why you're not going to be playing in the session anymore. But do we need an in-character reason why you're not going to be playing in the session anymore? No, right? And so, again, if you're in a situation where the player is so problematic, such a problem that you have to hit them with the blue lightning and make their character disappear, you have a real problem, and the blue lightning is not going to solve that problem. It's just not, right? Instead, you need to have a conversation with this player. You need to have a conversation as a group of players at the table. Talk it out, not punish the character for what the player is doing that you don't like. So that is the second thing that he talked about that is something GMs really should not do. We don't need to talk about that a lot more, I think, because we've talked about the bad Rob enough that um, and the blue lightning and all that stuff that we don't need to go into that in a lot of depth. But he definitely makes this point that you don't want to use your GM powers to punish the character for what the player is doing. It's just it's a bad idea all the way around. Now there was a guy over here. Here we go. Um, the third thing that he talked about, again, not in this particular order, was inconsistent ruling. So he talked about an example where they were in battle against a boss monster, and okay, so there's bad guys over there. So where? Okay, so I gotta go this way, maybe. Um, so he talked about how they were having a battle, and in the middle of the battle there was this tower, and one of the characters, not the rogue, one of the characters decided to climb the tower, and this is gonna be a pain. One of the characters decided to climb the tower, and in the middle of the cool epic battle, and I guess the GM decided, well, this is a cool epic battle, so I'm not gonna make them. I'm not gonna make this the fighter roll. And he just climbed the tower, and he was able to do it. And then after the battle was over and the big boss fight was done, the rogue decides to climb up to the tower to see if there's any treasure they missed. And the GM says, well, you're gonna have to make a roll. And the rogue makes the roll, rolls a natural one, falls, and gets hurt. And then the cleric's player said, but why did he have to make a roll when the fighter in the middle of the battle didn't have to make the roll? And the GM had no answer. He said this led to like a 15-minute argument. And the reason that it was an argument is because the GM was being inconsistent with his rulings. Right? And this comes back to like what Alex Macris said. If there's a rule in the book, and you follow it, then that's pretty objective and you can do that. But if you're going to make a ruling, either because it's not in the book or because you don't like the ruling in the book and you want to do it a different way, then what you need to do, okay, so this must be down. What you need to do is make sure you remember that rule so that you apply it the same way every time. That's the only way it's fair. If you apply it one way for one guy, if you one way for my character and another way for John's character and another way for Sarah's character, then that isn't fair to those of us who are getting the worst end of that deal. Where is this thing? Oh, it's right here and I missed it. See, I bet on a rewatch I'll see that. Alright, we completed that mission. We'll head out. So, it's perfectly fine to make your own rulings, to even change the rules, but you got to remember what you're doing and you've got to be consistent. So, let me give you an example. Let's go to Savage Worlds. And we're going to go to the Gadgeteer Edge. And this is a power edge, I think. Yes, this is a power edge. It's on page 46 of the core rules. And it says that this is for weird science. Some mechanical gurus can build incredible devices out of almost anything. A gadgeteer can spend up to 3 power points to jury-rig a device from most any reasonable collection of spare parts. This allows her to use any power normally available to weird science of her rank or lower in her particular setting with a power point cost of 3 or lower. The total cost of the power plus any modifiers cannot exceed 3 points, but she may create multiple devices. This takes one entire turn, during which she can do nothing else but make a weird science roll at -2. The inventor uses power points directly from her pool, but once its initial duration is finished, it cannot be maintained and it falls apart into its component parts. Okay, so this doesn't really say anything about the way this power can be used. Like, it doesn't say that you have to have equipment. It doesn't say you have to do it in a lab. It doesn't say that it doesn't say any of that. It just says you spend the power points and you take a turn, right? And once its initial duration is done, it can't be maintained and it falls apart into component pieces. right? It doesn't say anything about the requirements of making a device. There aren't any, right? So in our Deadlands game, the weird scientist, the mad scientist who has the gadgeteer edge, has like a bag of spare parts, and she opens the bag of spare parts and cobbles together powers. And I've allowed her to do that for 10 or 12 sessions, okay? If now another character comes along with gadgeteering, and I say to that player, you can only do this when you have access to a lab. That's not fair, right? I allowed the character with the gadgeteering who appeared first to do it one way, right? I shouldn't be having the character that comes second with the same edge do it another way, right? It's not fair. You need to be consistent. Everybody should be playing by the same rules. Similarly, the villains need to play by the same rules as the heroes. Well, let me give you a great example of this as we head to our mission. And we're going to just use the mission teleporter because this will be our last mission of this episode. The player characters, this was so much fun. They encountered a jackalope in Deadlands, and jackalope can't really do anything in combat. It mostly hides. It's got really good stealth, and it's interested in lucky people, like the characters who have bennies. And the jackalope is basically a luck drain. It's an unlucky thing. And the only thing it can do is when the jackalope is around and sort of within line of sight of you, or you're in line of sight of it. It doesn't even say you have to be in line of sight, but I decided that's a reasonable limitation. None of the people it's decided to follow can spend bennies, right? So, nobody around the jackalope can spend bennies. This is deadly, and a character almost died. So now we're in combat, right? And they're fighting a mosquito swarm, a set of mosquito swarms. And the mosquito swarms would have been trivial, except the characters couldn't spend bennies to reroll damage, they couldn't spend bennies to reroll attacks, and they couldn't spend bennies to soak wounds. And the mosquitoes are swarms. Swarms don't have to roll to hit. They just occupy the same space as you, and then you automatically take 2d4 of damage. And I was acing like crazy on the damage rolls, and I almost killed the ranger. Okay? So there were times when I made poor rolls. There was a time when the ranger, after she got healed and woke back up after almost dying, she couldn't shoot the swarm with her bullets because it doesn't do any good, right? There's a swarm of 500 mosquitoes and you shot one, big deal. There's still 499 of them to bite you, and these are mosquitoes the size of your fist. So the swarm rules say that attacks like swords, knives, bullets don't do anything. You can stomp on a swarm, right? And so she didn't want to get, but now you've got to get within radius of them, and then when they go, they'll damage you, right? So she didn't want to get into radius with them again, and she couldn't really shoot them because all she had was the types of weapons that the swarms are immune to. So she said, I'm going to do a test, right? And I'm going to intimidate them and try to scare them, right? And distract them or make them vulnerable. And so she did the test, and the swarm failed, right? Now, it doesn't say in the jackalope rules that the GM can't spend bennies. All it says is that no character can spend bennies in the jackalope's presence, right? Let me read it directly to you so you can see what I mean about applying the rules fairly. Okay, so this is the jackalope, which is from the Deadlands Core Rules, page 172. I guess this is kind of spoilers, hopefully not, but bad luck. A posse stalked by a jackalope suffers from horrible luck. They can't spend bennies until the thing loses interest, usually after a cowpoke dies or is killed. It says the posse can't spend bennies. It doesn't say the GM can't spend bennies. It specifically enjoins the posse from spending bennies. Okay? But what I said is, since you guys can't spend bennies, I can't either, right? To be fair, I'm not going to let the monsters spend bennies when you guys can't either. Now, again, it's perfectly within the rules for me to be able to spend my own bennies, but I thought, yeah, that's, to me, fair is fair. The jackalopes around, nobody has any luck, including the game master, right? Even though I'm not actually there, right? Because I'm the game master. I exist outside of the game. Another character that prevents you from spending bennies is Jasper Stone. And he is much more dangerous because he can shoot you and kill you, and he's very deadly. And Jasper Stone cannot be damaged by anything but the bullets that originally killed him. He's an undead, basically, a harrowed. And only the bullets that killed him can kill him again. Anything else, you can shake him, but you cannot wound him. Okay? And so that makes him really tough. And it says in the Deadlands Reloaded game, which is the only place where Jasper Stone is statted out. He's not statted out, as far as I know, in the Weird West. It says that nobody in his line of sight, including Stone himself, can spend bennies. I don't know why Stone gets any bennies, because he literally, by definition, can never spend bennies, right? But nobody else can either. And I've already decided, my party has not encountered Stone yet. He's going to show up. Either they can hunt him down, or he'll show up when they turn legendary. He's sent by Death, the Reckoner Death, to kill any posse that hits legendary status. So they're just at the end of Veteran. In the next session, if they do what I thought they were going to do 2 sessions ago, they'll reach the milestone of getting to Heroic. They'll get an advance. They'll get Heroic, and then the Los Diablos, the Devil Bulls, start pursuing you. But at Legendary, Jasper Stone starts pursuing you. Now, hopefully by then, I'm hoping they will know that they need the special bullets to kill him. Whether they'll have the bullets or not by then, I really don't know. It all depends on what they prioritize. Because they're going to need to fight 4 Servants of Chaos, and then find the bullets, and then deal with Jasper Stone. To ensure that they fight Jasper Stone, he's got something they need. They need the Death Stone, I think I called it. And the Death Stone is basically Jasper Stone's heart. So they're going to have to kill him, and then take his heart and use it in the ritual to stop chaos. And so hopefully it'll be really cool. And I really kind of like the story that I've come up with. Obviously, or I wouldn't be trying to run it. But Jasper Stone can't spend bennies, and they can't spend bennies. But again, it doesn't say in the rules the GM can't spend bennies. But again, to be consistent and fair, when they encounter Jasper Stone, I'm going to say, basically as a GM courtesy to you, although I am still allowed to spend bennies and thus spend them for Stone, I will not spend any bennies for Stone because it says he can't spend bennies, right? That's his own bennies, right? The GM can spend bennies on anything the GM wants, but I'm not going to spend bennies on behalf of a guy that the rules say can't spend bennies, just to be consistent and fair. Also, I think it would be insanely unfair for Stone to be as powerful as he is, and I can spend 4 bennies or whatever for him, and the party can't spend any. Like, there's no way you can win that battle, even if you have the right bullets. So I'm going to be, I'm going to try to make sure that it's as fair as possible. Domination here, and we're also going to throw our little buddies out to distract. And then we'll get him. You can definitely see we do take a pounding. We lose a lot of hit points. They haven't gotten very close to killing me, except once or twice when I've been careless because I've been talking. But I do take some damage because I don't have a good AOE opener. All of the AOE powers are point blank, except this one hold that doesn't seem to do anything, and then the fear almost never seems to actually trigger. So I don't know. Next point that Luke made. He doesn't like when game masters justify out of character to the players everything the NPCs are doing. Like this guy's attacking you because you're a cleric and he hates clerics because he's a demon or something like that. Um, I actually don't mind that, and I actually often do explain the logic of the NPCs. I think that I don't find that to be problematic. And in fact, I think sometimes it can be actually very helpful because when the players understand the logic of the NPCs, that helps them understand why things are happening. And so I don't actually, not only don't I object to this as a player, but I often do that as a GM. I've never had any players object. I mostly explain the logic in combat, right? So that they understand why they're doing something. Right, so when the swarms are attacking somebody, I'm like, okay, this you just did damage to the swarm and split it in half, so both of the resulting swarms are going to attack you. Right, that to me that makes sense, and that's just part of the narration. Right, it's sort of like when you're reading a book and the narrator gives you insight into the point of view of one of the characters in the book, and it helps you understand as a reader why the character is doing the things that it did. Right, instead of just describing what's happening, they describe why, and I don't see that I don't feel like that's really a problem. That's me. Feel free to leave your own comments about that. But he says you shouldn't excessively use out of character explanations for why the NPCs are doing what they're doing. Just go ahead and have them do it. You don't need to justify. And I agree you don't need to justify, but I think sometimes as a GM I find it helpful because I'm actually talking out loud and expressing to them and to myself, well, what is this guy going to do here? He's going to do this because of this, right? I think that's part to me. That's part of the role play, and especially if you're doing third-person narration, where my players will say, "Well, my ranger," and by the way, this is a Texas Ranger type character, not a D&D Ranger. My ranger is going to do a test here because she can't really do anything with her gun. I mean, my players and I do that all the time. One of my players was talking about the one with who's the gadgeteer. I can't remember the whole story of why he ended up saying it, but they were talking about whether he should attack or do some boosting of people, and he said, well, I view this character as a utility character who's there to make everybody else better, not necessarily there to do the damage herself. So I would rather buff you guys than do the attack, right? That's explaining the rationale of the character as well as its own thinking, right? We do that all the time and we don't have a problem with it, so that's really a your mileage may vary kind of piece of advice. The last bit, and he almost semi calls out Sly Flourish, the lazy dungeon master, for this. A little bit, he says he's not, but lazy dungeon master isn't no prep GMing. Um, he just talks about ways to be efficient with your time, but Luke says running a game without enough prep. And the key to this, and Luke doesn't actually, I don't know if he actually says this, but I feel like it's that's a key word is enough, not enough prep. And the reason that's a key is because the amount of prep necessary is going to vary by game master. Some game masters need just a little sketch of what they're going to do. Jordan Caves Callerman showed, without you being able to read the words, but just showed the spacing that to plan for a session plan that he had, right? Opened his spiral notebook and showed that it was basically down one side of down one page on the left side, and then the facing page it was a half page. So he'd written like a page and a half and said this was my notes for the last session we played. Because somebody was asking how much prep do you do, and it's like it's just a rough outline, and then I wing the rest of it. I would need more than that as a GM, and I do a lot of prep work. And I write everything down, and I prepare maps, and I prepare tokens. I don't want to do all of that stuff on the fly. I'm actually not great at doing it in Foundry, so I prep ahead of time, knowing what I'm not great at. By the way, guys, I do the same thing teaching. I was going out of my mind last week being handed a class 5 days into the semester and told, basically, you're teaching it in 2 days, do it. And I don't think the chair of my department has an appreciation for how hard that is for me, because She's a no prep GM. She reads through the chapter and everything the weekend before she teaches that week, and she sort of roughly sketches it out, and then she goes in with the PowerPoints from the book that she sort of uses, and then alternates between that and the whiteboard, right? And so for her, starting a class that she just was handed this week would be a lot less difficult than it was for me, because she doesn't do all of that pre-semester prep. Whereas for me, I had my zoology class, which I'm also teaching, fully done in the middle of December, and I was feeling like I'm late on this. I should have done this earlier because I got 2 more classes to prep. Didn't know about the other one that I'd never taught before that I ended up teaching 2 sections of this semester. All right, so like my zoology class, somebody asked me like how much of it is, like, in other words, like how far ahead can we go? I'm like, guys, you can go through. We have 4 exams. I said all the stuff up through exam 3 is already posted, and the stuff for exam 4, it's just I'm combining a couple of lectures and deleting a few slides from the previous semester. So it's a matter of about a half an hour of work to put 4 more lectures up and be done for the semester. I'll probably do that Monday, and then they're finished. That class is finished, other than writing exams. And since I've written the exams for this class before, it's a matter of just going back, looking at the old exams, and then tweaking it. And, that class is done. That's what I like to do. I like to have everything prepped so that whatever I have to wing is just a little bit of stuff, tweaking around, nibbling around the edges of what I've already prepped. And I do the same thing for game mastering, right? I have pages and pages, files and files and files in Foundry, the Foundry journals, of everything. I'm going through now. I'm like little by little working on every city they could visit. I'm trying to predict the order in which they're going to visit them, but there's really no way to know what they're going to have to go to. Denver, I'm fairly sure, and they're going to have to go to Painted Rock, aka Independence Rock, which they're planning to do next session. And they're in Headstone Hill right now. They just went back there to do something, and so those are all prepped. So I worked on Denver, but I also need to work on Tombstone, Arizona, because they're going to need to go there, and I need to work on Cheyenne, Wyoming, because they need to go there, and I'm going to need to work on, and it's not even in any of the books, St. Louis, I think, because they're going to need to go there, and I've got to work on Gettysburg because they're going to need to go there. So I've got like a little paragraph about each one and what I'm planning to do there. And now I'm going to have to go flesh it out and turn each one into a long, pages long file where I've got bulleted outline of everything. That's enough preparing for me. You might not need to prep that way. You might be able to just run on the fly. Pull out the deck of cards, design an adventure, flip the cards over the way they tell you to do for designing a random adventure, and in 5 minutes, you've got the adventure. You could do it while the players are coming in and sitting down at the table and getting out their miniatures and their dice. I would never be able to do that. So it's not preparing, right? It's knowing your needs and preparing enough for you, right? My colleague, my chair of my department, doesn't need to prep ahead the whole semester. I do, in order to present a similar quality class. Okay? I assume she presents a similar quality class. I've never watched her teach, but I assume so, right? As far as I know, her students seem to learn what they're supposed to learn, and there's no like difference between her students and other teachers' students in terms of what they learn. And I don't like everybody has a different way of doing it. The biochemistry professor prepares half-finished PowerPoints. She doesn't put the most important facts on there. She gives the students part of the story and then makes them tell her what's the rest of it, and then she writes it down using the smart pen on the computer, and it shows up on the PowerPoint. And then she saves those and posts those so the students who missed class can see it. And I'm like, I love the way she does it. It's great to be in class. I can't do it that way. It's just not comfortable for me. So you need to prep what works for you. The problem is if you don't prep what you need to prep that works for you, then you have an issue, right? Then you end up making a mess out of the scene, right, or the session. So when you prep, make sure you know how much prep you need. And I would say over prepare to begin with, and then scale it back as you see, I didn't need to prep this much. Go ahead and use the Lazy Dungeon Master Secrets. Here's part 1 and part 2 to those books. No prep GM, whatever works for you. But find out what works for you and then prep the amount you need to be a great GM. hopefully that was all helpful to you. And until next time, guys, when we are level 39, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.